Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Astotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Astotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All right, we need to close whatever doors we can over there, kitchen, and you may have to check the back door here if it goes onto the altar. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. On the 16th day of November 2021 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're on page 662 tonight. We're in chapter 18, the conclusion, the perfection of renunciation. Text number 2 at the bottom there. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sanyasam Kabayo Viduhu Sarvakarma Palatyagam Prahus Tyagam Vichakshanaha Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sannyasam Kavayo Viduhu Sarva Karma Palatyagam Prahustyagam Vichakshana. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sannyasam Kavayo Viduhu Sarva Karma Palatyagam Prahustyagam Vichakshana. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sannyasam Kavayo Viduhu Sarva Karma Palatyagam Prahustyagam Vichakshana. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sannyasam Kavayo Viduhu Sarva Karma Palatyagam Prahustyagam Vichakshana. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sankavayo Viduhu Sarva Karma Palatyagam Prahustyagam Vichakshana. Go ahead, Boo. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sannyasam Kavayo Viduhu Sarva Karma Palatyagam Prahustyagam Vichakshana. You want to try? Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sannyasam Kavayo Viduhu Sarva Karma Palatyagam Prahustyagam Vichakshana. No? Go ahead. Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sannyasam Kavayo Viduhu Sarva Karma Palatyagam Prahustyagam Vichakshana. Zoomland.
Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam
Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam
Sannyasam Kavayo Viduhu
Sannyasam Kavayo Viduhu
Sarva Karma Palatyagam
Sarva Karma Palatyagam
Prahustyagam Vichakshanaha.
Prahustyagam Vichakshanaha.
Shri Bhagavanu Vacha
Shri Bhagavanu Vacha
Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam
Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam
Sannyasam Kavayo Viduhu
Sannyasam Kavayo Viduhu
Sarva Karma Palatyagam
Sarva Karma Palatyagam
Prahustyagam Vichakshanaha.
Prahustyagam Vichakshanaha. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, Kamyanam, with desire, Karmanam, of activities, Nyasam, renunciation, Sannyasam, the renounced order of life, Kavayaha, the learned, Viduhu, know. Sarva, of all karma activities, Phala, of results, Tyagam, renunciation, Prahu, called Tyagam, renunciation, Vichakshanaha, the experienced. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "The giving up of activities that are based on material desire is what great learned men call the renounced order of life, sannyas. And giving up the results of all activities is what the wise call renunciation or tyaga." So just to review before we read the purport, translation of text 1, Arjuna said, "Almighty Amna One, I wish to understand the purpose of renunciation, tyaga, and of the renounced order of life, sannyas, O killer of the Keshi demon, master of the senses." So Krishna is answering his question. Purport: the performance of activities for results has to be given up. This is the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita. But activities leading to advanced spiritual knowledge are not to be given up. This will be made clear in the next verses. In the Vedic literature, there are many prescriptions of methods for performing sacrifice for some particular purpose. There are certain sacrifices to perform to attain a good son or to attain elevation to the higher planets. But sacrifices prompted by desires should be stopped. However, sacrifice for the purification of one's heart or for advancement in the spiritual science should not be given up. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So this chapter is called the conclusion, the perfection of renunciation. And Arjuna's question has to do with two things, sannyas and tyaga. Now, they are similar because sannyas involves a lot of tyaga. Tyaga means giving up, literally giving up things. Here, Krishna defines tyaga as giving up the fruits of one's activities, right? Giving up the results of all activities is what the wise call renunciation. And sannyas is more internal here. The giving up of activities that are based on material desire is what great learned men call renounced order of life. So there's some overlap there. Sannyas certainly involves a certain amount of tyaga. In fact, that's the external aspect of sannyas. Normally, it would be at a certain age of life, one gives up relation to the family, whatever, and goes off to the forest or something like that. So there's a giving up. But the real key aspect of sannyas is what's happening in the heart, is the feeling. And that's why he defines it there. Kamyanam karmanam nyasam, giving up the activities with desire, with material desire. And this brings back those who were here yesterday, I think practically all of you, this idea of vairagya. Vairagya is an essential element of sannyas. Otherwise, sannyas is simply for show, external. Vairagya literally means without desire, no raga, for material things. And this vairagya is the kind of the, if you're practicing Krishna consciousness, you're practicing yoga, you can see, you know perfectly well how much you're advancing by how detached you are internally to the things that before were very attractive and were binding you to this material world. This idea of the knots in the heart, the hridaya granthi, is very important. There's quite a few verses in the Bhagavatam describing this hridaya granthi and how they have to be cut or loosened, untied, somehow gotten free. One of Prabhupada's favorites was Yat Pada Pankata Palasa Balasa Bhaktya Karmashayam Gwaditam Udgwantiyanti Santa Tadvanna Riktamatayo Yatayopi Ruddha Sroto Ganastamadanam Bhajabasudevam. This is actually very pertinent to this subject matter. So this comes at near the end of the teachings of the Kumaras to Maharaj Prithu. We had this verse some time ago when we were hearing about Maharaj Prithu in the 4th canto. So what it means is, the word vilas is commonly used to mean spiritual pleasure. We have the book Hari Bhakti Vilas, right? Hari Bhakti Vilas. The spiritual pleasure, transcendental pleasure, of the that accrues or that experienced by those who are seriously practicing Hari Bhakti, which means Krishna consciousness, devotion to Krishna. So here the word is used, Pada Pankaja Palasha Vilasa Bhaktya. By the process of devotional service, the joy of serving the lotus feet of the Lord, Pada Pankaja Palasha, literally means the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. Karmashayam Goditam Udgati. That karmashayam, the desire to enjoy what we call sense gratification, is gotitam. It's like a knot. It is untied. Gotitam udgotiyanti. That knot is untied. For the santas. Santas means the saints, the devotees. Same word. We're sitting here in San Diego. You go up to Santa Fe. It's the same word. Santa. Saint. So when the devotees who have come to the point of experiencing the pleasure of bhakti by serving Krishna's lotus feet, it's just a metaphor for all of the activities of bhakti. Then the knots in the heart are cut. And that's really what you're after, vairagya. That may manifest, and it often does manifest, in literally not engaging in these things, not being even interested. Whereas those who, and then the rest of the verse is very significant. Tadvan narikta matayo apiropirudha. Those whose minds are devoid of bhakti, they may be ordinary persons, or they may be yogis trying to get some yogic siddhi, or impersonalist yogis, bogus yogis, anyone else whose minds don't have bhakti. They may, whatever they may be externally, they can't stop these waves of material desire in the heart from overwhelming them. Srotoganas means like a flowing river, because if you're not experiencing the pleasure of bhakti, you have to be trying to experience the pleasure of matter. We're enjoying beings naturally. The idea in devotional service is to purify that desire so that instead of trying to enjoy these gross senses and being frustrated, because you can never get happiness that way, the senses are limited and such pleasures are temporary. You do those things, you may act with the senses in order to bring the spirit, the soul, into touch with Krishna. And in this way you purify the senses and develop your spiritual senses and your spiritual consciousness, so that you're actually engaging with Krishna, and that pleasure is ultimately unbounded by time or space. I always like to refer back to these verses in the 5th chapter, where Krishna is describing in 2 verses the difference between spiritual pleasure and material pleasure. So he says, Yehi sangsparjaja boga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta konteya nateshu ramate buddha. Buddha, those who are intelligent, who understand the difference between matter and spirit, they know that the pleasures that are experienced by the contact of the senses with their objects is the source of misery. And on top of that, it's temporary. It's flickering, comes and it goes. Adyantavanta, that's beginning and an end. So the wise don't try to enjoy that pleasure. What do? Previous verse. Bhaya sparsheshu asaktatma. Vindadyatmanaya sukham sab brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam ashnute. Now the word sukham means happiness. Akshaya means unbroken ashnute. The wise, they eschew, means they don't engage with these external pleasures. They can be also subtle pleasures of the mind. That's also a sense. It's said to be the 6th sense. Bhayaspar asaktatma, they're not attracted. Vindadyatmanaya sukham, because they're enjoying the pleasure within. Krishna is as close as possible to us as could be. He's in our very heart. But we've forgotten him since time immemorial, so we're looking out. We don't know the existence of Krishna, the super soul. Vindadyatmanaya sab brahma yoga yuktatma. So Brahma yoga, I mean they're linked to Brahman, the supreme Brahman is Krishna, by yoga, by the bhakti yoga, by the loving devotion. And so they enjoy unbreakable happiness. This is the stark contrast. People don't know about that other kind of happiness. So the real source of the whole problem is ignorance. We have brought it on ourselves. We wanted to forget, to try to enjoy separately. And now for who knows how many millions of births, we've been frustrated in that attempt. So Krishna consciousness, which is the eternal Sanatana Dharma of the living entity, to learn about it, both the science of bhakti and the actual methods of devotional service, is the greatest boon. We've been given this great gift by Srila Prabhupada, who made such a great effort to teach it and spread it and write about it, and that's what this is all about. So the idea of sannyas and tyaga are both important, and Krishna is going to describe more in detail. There has to be a certain amount of tyag, literally giving things up. What does he say? Giving up the results of all activities is what wise co-renunciation. So, in other words, you perform an activity, there's a certain fruit. What do you do with that fruit? Do you just hold it onto yourself? Do you try to enjoy it in some way or other? Then that's the opposite of tyaga. But we're not just giving up. When you use that fruit as part of your bhakti, then it becomes jagya. Then it becomes a positive thing. You can work so hard, make a lot of money, but if you try to just enjoy sense gratification with it, then you just compound your entanglement in the material world. But if you use as much as possible, you live comfortably, live what you need, but you use as much as possible for the service of the Lord, this is the perfection of vairagya. Last night at the end, I don't know if I'm going to reiterate it, because we're talking about these subjects, so it's worthwhile. Rupa Goswami, in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he gives a definition of real vairagya and pulga vairagya. Remember, the word pulga means weak or false vairagya. So, first, the false vairagya. This is often seen by what we call the mayavadis, those who think that the ultimate reality is Brahman, without variation, just a white light. And that Krishna is a manifestation of that. That Krishna is a manifestation of the Brahman. And they reject all of the things that we have as aids for devotional service. From the deities to the holy name, to the prasadam, to the temples, everything, it's a manifestation of Maya. Because it's just bricks and there's stone deities, you need the emotional bhaktas need all of these things to keep them enlivened. But the as I spent some time with these people. Before I joined, I was rescued by the devotees. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. And so he literally told me, he saw I was being attracted to the devotees, and he said, "This is for the emotional masses. The real thing is gyan, gyan, gyan." They've emphasized knowledge. But knowledge without bhakti is very dry. What's to know about the white light? Ultimately, it's unfulfilling for the soul. So, therefore, prapanchikataya buddhya harisambandhi vastunok mumukshubhi parityago vairagam pagakotyate. The impersonalists, their ultimate goal is mukti, liberation. And they define liberation as giving up one's entanglement with a physical body, or any kind of body, and merging back into the Supreme Brahman, impersonal Brahman. They neglect these instructions of Krishna in the 14th chapter, where he says, Brahmano hi pratishtaham. I am the basis of that Brahman. He declares right there. Not that the Brahman is the basis of me. You see? So the result of the impersonalists, as described in this verse I quoted from the four Kumaras, speaking to Maharaj Prithu, Tadban narikta matayo yatayopi ruddha srotoganaf tamadanam bhajabasit vasudevam. Ultimately, the natural tendency of the living entity to enjoy, you're not enjoying all the varieties of service and wonderful interaction with Krishna. You don't believe in that. So you're sitting there in the white light, in the Brahman, and you're bored. It says in another verse, it says that those by practicing severe austerities, suppressing the urges of the senses and all of these desires, because you don't have the holy name, you don't have the kirtan, you don't have anything. You just have your own mind. So a few, not everyone, who tries it, can come up to the point of Brahman realization, Brahma Bhuta. But aruha kuchena param padang tato patantyadho anadhyadasham. Because they were averse to serving the lotus feet of Krishna, they eventually fall down again. And fall down means they get entangled in material activities. They may perform some charity work or whatever, you know, or they can become totally corrupt and simply be in it for the money and whatever they can, you know, glean from it. So, back to sannyas and tyaga. The performance of activities for results, for selfless results, has to be given up. And this is defined here as sannyas, right? Giving up all activities that are based on material desires, we call sannyas. That will lead one, but the activity leading to advanced spiritual knowledge are not to be given up. So we have to be wise enough, intelligent enough, guided enough to make a differentiation of what activities are binding and what activities are liberating, or bringing us closer to Krishna. And that has been exhaustively described in the books of Srila Prabhupada, which are following right in the line of Rupa Goswami. One of the first books Prabhupada translated was the Nectar of Devotion, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is the how-to book of devotional service in the Gaudiya line. Not only the process, but the goal is defined there. The different rasas and wonderful descriptions of the maternal ras and the fraternal ras and the conjugal ras. Conjugal ras is touched upon, and there's a whole other book, part 2 of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, called the Ujjvala Nilamani, which deals with all the intricacies of Krishna and the gopis and Radharani, like that. That probably didn't translate that, but that's available now. So everything is there. It's just a question of us seriously taking it upon ourselves and having faith that this is really what we should aspire for. We may make, you know, suppose there's 1,000 steps, we may only take 50 or 100 steps this lifetime, but at least we know we're going in the right direction. And that whatever we do in this lifetime will be carried over to the next. So there's no loss, no diminution. Whereas anything you do materially is lost, either before or at the time of death. It's gone. So what's the better investment? We're all investment. We're not investment bankers, but we have to invest our time, our energy, and sometimes our wealth in something in this lifetime. So best if we can invest in something that there's never any loss or diminution, right? And the result of that investment is, you know, in a very kind of simple way, you can say, is decreasing our suffering down to nil and increasing our happiness to infinity. That's the promise. And you have all these acharyas and these great souls who have gone before us, who say this is possible. This is actually what you can achieve. So therefore, we should try to find out here that this chapter is full with wonderful conclusive verses. And this process of tyaga and sannyas is important to understand. Okay, any discussion on this first verse here, or the second verse of the chapter?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Haribol.
So in the last line that it says, I'm going to read it. The last line it says...
You're talking about the purport?
The second sloka, yeah. Purport.
Second sloka, purport, last line, last sentence. Okay, what does it say? However, sacrifice?
However, sacrifice for the purification for one's heart or for advancement in the spiritual science should not be given up. So my question is, what kind of sacrifice for yajna is like this yajna, bhakti yoga, or sankirtan yajna, or any other yajna? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at our, you know, any process that we do as a kind of sacrifice, because you're not working for some fruitive result. That means you're sacrificing your time, your energy, for dressing the deities, doing sankirtan, just chanting Hare Krishna. Japa yajna. Yajnanam japa yajna ham. Krishna says in the 10th chapter, we should understand that of all sacrifices, I am japa, of the holy name. Now, we normally think of Sankirtan yajna as congregational chanting. They're both yajnas. The point is, yajna can be defined quite broadly here. And also, there's it's important sacrifice for purification of one's heart or for advancement in spiritual science. There's not two things there. There's one. Sacrifice for purification of one's heart, kama, or for advancement in spiritual science, kama, should not be given up. Notice the advancement in spiritual science means purification of one's heart. So this is not very difficult to understand. All the things that we do in our sadhana bhakti can be thought of as a sacrifice. And those should not be given up. From outside, it looks like it's also ordinary activity. But it's not, because the motive is different and the goal is different. We're not just getting up early in the morning to go to work to make some money to pay the rent. That's a sacrifice, but it's a material sacrifice. There's whole parts of the Vedas where you can perform fancy sacrifices to get better birth or go to heaven. Those are also, don't do that. 9th chapter, Krishna says, Chine punne madhya lokam vishanti. Even if you're able to go to heaven, then you start spending in the credit card. You've got so much punya on the card, right? Chine punya, when the punya is all finished, and then they say, sorry, the credit card doesn't work anymore. All right, down we go, back to Madhya Loka. This is a nice chat. So what did you gain? You wasted so much time. You had hopes of enjoying. You did enjoy for a while, but it's temporary, and down you come again to the material world of Madhya Loka. But in Krishna consciousness, the gain is permanent. The result is the best it could possibly be. You come back. You return back home, back to Godhead, to that state of perfect happiness in relation to Krishna. Krishna never falls down to the material world. He's achyuta. If you're fixed to his lotus feet, you're also not going to fall down. We wandered away, and that's why he says, Yad Gatvananda Vartante, the Dhamma Paramamama. This supreme Dhamma of mine, if someone goes there, he never comes back. Why would we come back again? We made that mistake a long time ago. Wow, I'm glad I got back up here. No more. That's it. That's why, so we want to try to return there. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhu, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, text 3. Tyajam dosha vadityeke karma prahu manishinaha yagyadana tapakarma natyajam iti chapare. Some learned men declare that all kinds of fruitive activities should be given up as faulty. Yet other sages maintain that acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance should never be abandoned. Purport. There are many activities in the Vedic literature which are subjects of contention. For instance, it is said that an animal can be killed in a sacrifice, yet some maintain that animal killing is completely abominable. Although animal killing in a sacrifice is recommended in the Vedic literature, the animal is not considered to be killed. The sacrifice is to give a new life to the animal. Sometimes the animal is given a new animal life after being killed in the sacrifice, and sometimes the animal is promoted immediately to the human form of life. But there are different opinions among the sages. Some say that animal killing should always be avoided, and others say that for a specific sacrifice, it is good. All these different opinions on sacrificial activity are now being clarified by the Lord himself. So, here we have this yajna, dana, tapak, karma. This is the subject here. Sacrifice, charity, and austerity is going to be the subject that Krishna will deal with now in these verses. All right, so he's setting us up. Now, what is Krishna's opinion? Nishtayam shunume tatra tyage bhattata sattama tyago hi purusha vyagra Trivada samprakirtitaha. O best of the Bharatas, now hear my judgment about renunciation. Renunciation here means tyaga. O tiger among men, renunciation is declared in the scriptures to be of 3 kinds. Purport. Although there are differences of opinion about renunciation, here the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, gives his judgment, which should be taken as final. After all, the Vedas are different laws given by the Lord. Here the Lord is personally present, and his word should be taken as final. The Lord says that the process of renunciation should be considered in terms of the modes of material nature in which it is performed. So, there's no absolute good for Tyaga renunciation. It all depends on what your mode is and what your motive is. Just like Hiranyakashipu, for a while there, he gave everything up. Right? He was just performing tremendous austerity, so much so his whole body was eaten by ants, and he was keeping his life circulating in his bones, and pretty impressive. But he was just causing a lot of trouble in the universe. Finally, the demigods had to pray to Brahma to please go down, stop it, because he's so powerful. Even though he was buried in the anthill, he was scorching the earth, the universe. And his motive was so he would become immortal, so he could rule the universe and like that. So tapasya can definitely be misused, and so can sacrifice, and even charity. It can be done with a total motive, as I mentioned before. This word damba, is hypocrisy, bluffing, just for the sake of looking charitable, with nefarious motives. So the motive is everything, and that has to do with what mode of nature you're in. So let's read about that. All right. Text 5, was I? That's the one we're on, right? Yajnadana tapakarma natyajyam karyameva tat yajnodhanam tapaschaiva pavanani manishinam. Acts of charity, acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up. They must be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great souls. Purport. The yogis should perform acts for the advancement of human society. There are many purificatory processes for advancing a human being to spiritual life. The marriage ceremony, for example, is considered to be one of these sacrifices. It is called Vivaha Yajna. Should a sannyasi who is in the renounced order of life and who has given up his family relations encourage the marriage ceremony? The Lord says here that any sacrifice which is meant for human welfare should never be given up. Vivaha Yajna, the marriage ceremony, is meant to regulate the human mind so that it may become peaceful for spiritual advancement. For most men, this Vivaha Yajna should be encouraged even by persons in the renounced order of life. Sannyasis should never associate with women, but that does not mean that one who is in the lower stages of life, a young man, should not accept a wife in the marriage ceremony. All prescribed sacrifices are meant for achieving the Supreme Lord. Therefore, in the lower stages, they should not be given up. Similarly, charity is for the purification of the heart. If charity is given to suitable persons, as described previously, it leads one to advanced spiritual life. So, now Prabhupada doesn't mention it here in his purport, but he mentions it elsewhere, that the Vivaha Yajna, which normally sannyasis don't have anything to do with, in Prabhupada's case, because he was the Acharya of the Hare Krishna movement, and he was trying to spread Krishna consciousness, and he had all of these disciples, and many of them were young men and young women, he saw that if they're going to advance, many of them need to be married. And so, who else is going to perform the marriage? He actually performed the marriage, which is not done by sannyasis in India. In fact, it caused some criticism from his godbrothers. Not only that, but he opened up in many of the temples we don't have here, but you see in LA and some other temples, especially in America in the early days, you had a Brahmacharini ashram. There isn't even, I don't even think that term is current in India. There's nothing a Brahmacharini ashram. The young ladies were all protected and married, they did. But in America, there was this freedom. So many of the ladies didn't want to get married, at least not right away, but they wanted to practice devotional service. So Prabhupada started this Brahmacharini ashram, and it became very successful. And he always liked to point to the fact that the UK preaching, which Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati sent some of his leading sannyasis there to preach, hoping that they would be able to put down some roots, and that there would be an institution there. They spent money and they spent time, and they preached to some of the lords and ladies, but they really didn't do much. They made they spent a lot of money, and they made a few disciples, and they came back. But Prabhupada, he sent 3 householder couples there in 1969, I think. And they didn't even have a place to stay. You know, they were on the street, and then they were able to stay here and there. And eventually, they met George Harrison. It's a famous story, you know. And he was interested in Eastern culture. And he was a worldwide figure, you know, famous, you know. And he began chanting, and suddenly the devotees were they became famous, you know, and Hare Krishna became famous. And then eventually they were able to get a place, I think, to stay with John Lennon at his estate, and they invited Prabhupada over, and he came over. And the whole thing started because of the efforts of these 3 householder couples. Yamuna and Gurudas, Mukunda and Janaki, and Shyamasundar and Malati. You know, they became famous figures. So, because of the overarching emphasis on bhakti yoga, and you know that they became empowered to attract the attention of somebody like George Harrison. That was Krishna's arrangement, but they also, you know, were able to make devotees. So the idea is that bhakti yoga is oftentimes the rules are broken for the higher good of giving Krishna consciousness. And so Srila Prabhupada was, you know, he could break them. And which ones are essential? The 4 regs are essential. Those never broken. You know, he never compromised on those. 16 rounds. But there were other things that he allowed to happen that made it possible for bhakti to spread all over the world. So that's a higher, you know, and what was the spirit? As Prabhupada defines it here, sannyasis should never serve women, but that doesn't mean that one who is in the lower stages of life, young man, should not accept the wife in the marriage ceremony. And in certain cases, sannyasis can also perform that marriage ceremony. So these sacrifices, the idea is once you understand the context, that whatever you're engaging here, the purpose is for advancing in devotional service, which basically means purification of the heart. All of these, yajna, dana, and tapa, sannyas, tyaja, there's a proper way of doing it in which it's part of the whole bhakti culture. And Prabhupada wonderfully describes that in these purports. And this is why, you know, this chapter will finally conclude with the essential teachings of bhakti yoga in 2 verses. Man mana bhava man bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Mame vashisi satyante patijane piyosime and sarva dharma parityaja. Mame kam sharanam braja. Aham tvam savapapebhyo mokshiyasami mashaja. Just think of me, Krishna says, just think of me, become devoted, worship me and bow down low. You'll come to me, O friend, I promise you this boon I shall bestow. Give up all other dharmas and surrender only unto me. Your sins I'll nullify, O Arjun, from anxiety be free. If we can just take those 2 verses to heart, then we've gotten the essential message of the Bhagavad Gita. So that will culminate at the end here. Okay, should we go on? Okay. Text 6. Etan apitu karmani sangam tyakva palani cha kartavyani me parta nishtitam matamuttamam. All these activities should be performed without attachment or any expectation of result. They should be performed as a matter of duty, O son of Pita. That is my final opinion. Purport. Although all sacrifices are purifying, one should not expect any result by such performances. In other words, all sacrifices which are meant for material advancement in life should be given up. But sacrifices that purify one's existence and elevate one to the spiritual plane should not be stopped. Everything that leads to Krishna consciousness must be encouraged. In the Srimad Bhagavatam also it is said that any activity which leads to devotional service to the Lord should be accepted. That is the highest criterion of religion. A devotee of the Lord should accept any kind of work, sacrifice, or charity which will help him in the discharge of devotional service to the Lord. So it's just like, you know, anyone who's lived in the ashram or practice devotional service, there's so many things that may look or seem like they're just like what the outside people are doing. And they look at us and they say, well, you guys, you know, doing what you're doing, what we're doing. But just like you say this, I think Adriana's doing this painting now, right? So what is she getting out of it? You know, she's putting in hours here. She's applying her skill, you know. But as far as I know, she's not getting paid. It's not that she's $10 an hour. And if it was only $9 an hour, she would quit. And it's not like that. She's getting the wonderful satisfaction of decorating, you know, the temple of the Lord. You know, and I'm sure she's very happy doing it. I don't have the skill, but I mean, we appreciate the result. We should, when we walk in here, we should remember those who came before us and put in the hours and the work, you know, to make it like it is. Just like when we see the deities, we should appreciate the deities and we should appreciate the servants of the deities. This is bhakti, where you're so thankful that there are people who are dedicated and skilled who are regularly doing that and making it possible for us to worship the deities and appreciate them. So that's bhakti. It's like prasadam, you know, when some wonderful prep is made nicely and offered and you can experience it. Well, you know, who made that, you know? And the person who makes it said, yeah, I got a bonus. I got a $12 bonus. It's for, you know. No, it's not like that. The bonus is the Lord's satisfaction. Just like serving out prasadam, you know. When we used to have that, when was it? Oh, before the COVID, you know, and we had people at the Sunday feast, you know. I remember Bhajan Rai Maharaj, before, you know, he had his serious diabetes, it's hard for him to walk. But even then, a big feast, he'll come around and do it. And he loved to serve out prasadam, you know. And I also, that's how I don't eat so much at night anymore. But it's just a blissful service to help other devotees to experience prasadam and to have that interaction, you know. And that's what bhakti is. You know, when you think about a kirtan, you're all serving each other, right? The leader is chanting, people can hear, and then he's hearing when they chant, and it's back and forth, back and forth. And altogether, you're uplifting each other. So it's sacrifice. We call it Sankirtan Yajna, right? So that's the wonderful aspect of Krishna consciousness, that without the fruit of motive, you know, which is what keeps us bound here, but the motive of that culminates ultimately in what we call prema, love. The whole idea is that you're simply enjoying by giving Krishna pleasure because you love him so much. Think of a mother and child. The child's completely dependent on the mother, and all he knows is the mother. And the mother is simply concerned, is the child happy and healthy and safe and everything like that. And if the child, you know, gives one of those little smiles with no teeth, I've seen those, you know, then the mother's day is completely made. It used to be like that with Prabhupada. When Prabhupada would give him his oceanic smile, devotees would feel that their life is successful. So you can see how materialists can't understand that. They say, well, how much are you making per hour? You know? Nothing. Then why are you so happy? Why am I so miserable? That's the problem. The fruit of enterprise just, you know, drags you down into the material considerations, and ultimately it's so frustrating because you can never get to that point of you know, complete satisfaction. There's always the fear in the back of your mind, oh, this is going to end, and then there's the part of this out and out misery, you know, where you feel, well, why me, you know. Because it happens to everyone. It's just what material life is all about. You know? And so all of this knowledge is so important to help us rise up to that platform. There's a wonderful section I want to refer to you in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The whole teachings of Kapila Deva at the end of the third canto are worth studying. When I first went to India, that's the one book I took. The third canto in the original series was in 4 volumes, and the last volume was all Kapila Deva's teachings, starting with chapter 25 of the third canto. And he's teaching his mother, and right near the beginning, he has these 8 verses which I've there happened to be 8. So I said, oh, it's all about Sangha, Sadhu Sangha. Who is satsang, you know? Who is a sadhu, and what are the benefits of association with the sadhu? And so he's describing there exactly what Krishna is dealing with here: how to break these attachments, and how material attachments, and transform them really into spiritual attachments. You got to be attached. So he says, "Prasangam majanam pashamatmana kabayo vadu." Saeshu sadhushukato moksha dwaram apavatam. So he says, I put this one into a little poem. Mundane attachment keeps us bound to birth and death, infernal. But love for sadhus opens wide the doors to life eternal. So it's a question of redirecting. The word prasanga. Prasanga means, sangha means two things. It means association and attachment. And one leads to the other. As you associate, as you contemplate, dhyato pasas sangasteshu bhajayate, sangat sanjayate kama. Sanjat sanjayate kama. As you associate, you develop your desires. Whoever you associate with, the modes of nature you associate with, you know, the things that you interact with. So association is everything. So here he said, prasanga madadam pasham. The material association and attachments, we said prasanga. They're very powerful, like ropes binding us. I mentioned this, the Vidya Granthi. So the wise know that that attachment has to be redirected to the sadhus. We ultimately want to redirect it to Krishna, but we can't see Krishna right away. We need these sadhus, the saints, to introduce us to Krishna. So he says, okay, then the question is, who's the sadhus? Where can I find the sadhus? So he has a nice description. Titikshava, Karunika, Suridak Sarvadehinam, Ajata Shatravak Shanta, Sadhavak Sarabhushana. Here's the ornaments of the sadhus. They're very tolerant, but very, very compassionate to all living entities. Prabhupada would give the example of Jesus Christ. He sacrificed his life for preaching God consciousness in his time and place, what they could understand. You know? And Prabhupada was also ready to do that. He almost did it, and Krishna, you know, saved him. But he was willing to sacrifice his health and his time, even his life, for giving us God consciousness. So that's the sadhu. And they have to be tolerant. Prabhupada is speaking in these very verses. Some of you may know, there's a wonderful book that recently was published by Giriraj Swami on the struggle to establish the temple in Bombay, the first temple, Juhu. Have you been there? It's a wonderful place. But it was such a struggle. They got the land. Juhu Beach at that time was kind of remote from downtown Bombay, you know. And it was uncultivated land, you know, but it was available. And so Prabhupada put a down payment on it, you know, and then moved devotees on there, and there were rats, and it was very hard to live there. And then it turned out that the guy who sold it to him didn't really sell it to him, you know, the down payment. He had been using this land to cheat people out of their money. Then he would somehow do some legal thing and keep the down payment and kick them off the land. But Prabhupada wouldn't. He was so smart. He immediately moved the deities on there, so that because the deities, once the deities are there, you know, people say, "Oh, you can't remove the deities." Anyway, it's an incredible saga, and Prabhupada is saying, yes, this is exactly the qualities we have to have: tolerance, and compassion. We're going to stay on the land because we have to preach. Suridak Sarvadehinam, the friend of every living entity. Ajata Shatrava, having no enmity toward anyone. The enemy is never born. Someone may see him as an enemy, but you don't see anyone else as an enemy. Sadhavak Sadhabhushana. Shanta, very peaceful. So we'll have to continue this tomorrow. But it's exactly what Krishna is talking about here, how to systematically transfer your attachments from matter to Krishna. This is the whole process of devotional service. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari. Are you still cooking? You finished cooking? Okay, because I need to leave and you can do the kirtan. Thank you. Thank you for listening, by the way. Hare Krishna. And those in Zoom land. as well. Okay, so we'll continue with text 7. It's interesting how the